Hello, good afternoon. It is still Thursday, January 9th. It's a chilly, chilly, cold day here in North Carolina. And I am Rob, the developer dad. And my coffee is woefully empty. So bear with me. We're going to go for a little walk over to the coffee machine in the fridge and fill this up, and then we're going to dive in. And while I do that, I'm going to talk through what I'm doing. Um, I am building applications primarily with .NET, a little pinch of JavaScript when I absolutely can't avoid it. Um, my front ends are in either Blazor or as close to pure HTML and CSS as I could possibly manage. But everything else is C# and .NET Core. I've been doing this live coding and sort of talking through development matters and architecture and patterns and this and that and the other thing since roundabouts May of last year, when I got unfortunately laid off from the company I was working for. And I decided, you know what, I've been given an awful lot of free help over the years from coworkers and mentors and so on and so forth. And it was time for me to kind of do that publicly as sort of like a give back to the world. So that's what I'm trying to do with these streams here, is kind of share the things that I've learned and make some mistakes live in public as I go, because everybody gets all wound up about making mistakes and having defects and so on and so forth, and those happen, man. It's less important that you make mistakes and more important how you handle them and deal with them after the fact. And I've come to learn over the years that radical honesty is absolutely the best way of doing it. When you step in it, say, whoops, I stepped in it. Here's how we fix it. And that's served me really, really well. So this morning at the start of the stream, I took about 20 minutes to kind of organize the remaining to-dos that I have to make the DMs familiar into a live, actual, factual product. And I missed one. I need to finish revising the terms of service doc and get it hosted on the www.tdmf site. And I'm going to turn this into an issue. What other repositories have I got? I don't have any other projects. We're going to lump this in with TDMF admin. We're going to assign myself, edit. I have a draft of the EULA for the DMs familiar on disk. Need to finish editing that and get it converted to HTML and hosted on the www site for the product. I also need to review the privacy policy and make sure it contains the correct email addresses for support issues. And save. I'll do that sometime this week, but I want to have it there in my project thing as an actual to-do list, mostly just to have accountability to myself. So this morning I cleaned up the JSON reader code. I had written a couple of methods that allow me to take a big JSON object that exists as a string and use sort of JSON query path, like dot notation through the nodes to find specific or particular values that are stored in that JSON document. And I stuffed that, or I moved that out of the component that it was in into my main application framework library, or my architectural framework library. And that's going to be really useful when I'm doing things like handling webhook calls and inbound API calls from third-party systems and stuff. And right now I have, I need to add some identification values to the subscription templates where appropriate. And those subscription templates are in my catalog. And my catalog consists of two items right now. I can close program.cs. I don't need that anymore. So we've got store access abstractions, store access LS API. That is mostly where I need it to be. I need to come into catalog abstractions, add subscription template. And we've got SKU, name, description, renewal period days, allowed status is default status. Okay. I need to add a public int vendor item ID. Now, does this guy? No, he does not. Okay. Represents the item ID used in setting up a purchase of the subscription within the ECommerce vendors systems with lemon squeezy. This value corresponds to the required variant ID in the create checkout call. And I'm going to make this nullable. Oh, a buddy I used to work with just messaged me back on LinkedIn. He's the product manager for a company that's looking for a solutions architect. And I saw the job posting first and applied for it. And then as I was looking at the job posting, I noticed, oh, crap, Kyle. He was my manager at a company, several companies back. And great guy. We get along really, really well. And we worked really well together. So I reached out to him after I applied. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So vendor item ID. Cool. And I got to come here and save. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and pop this open up LinkedIn. Bear with me for just a second. And I want to see what he had to say. Send, and this is a recruiter. And thanks, John. I'm in the middle of a live coding stream right now. I'll be free after 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Call me at my phone number, phone number is about the role you have in front of you. I stream live coding sessions, a teaching tool to help other developers learn about coding in .NET and product development matters in general. It's a give back to the community that I started doing after I got laid off last May. Smiley face. There we go. That needs to go away. Let's focus on task at hand. Public int vendor item ID. Cool. Save this. Now, my product catalog, my product catalog is currently hard-coded because I have exactly two different kinds of subscriptions. I've got DM Familiar paid monthly, DM Familiar free. And I don't expect the data in these objects to change very often at all. So I didn't bother standing up database infrastructure or anything like that. This data is non-volatile. And when something is non-volatile, just hard code it. Don't go to all the pain and agony of stuffing it into even a file. It ain't worth the effort. So get catalog, filter catalog, async. We've got all these goodies. Get catalog item, populate catalog. Here we go. So the free template, we're going to leave the product ID null because Lemon Squeezy doesn't manage free subscriptions for me. However, the paid template uses that vendor item ID equals, and you know what? I'm going to do this as a string. Not a string, but a string. Because if I switch vendors, other e-commerce providers might use a GUID-based or a string-based item identifier, SKU identifier kind of thing. Lemon Squeezy uses an integer, but I'm not positive that other e-commerce providers would use an integral value for that. So I'm going to go ahead and just use a string. And then when I'm preparing the request to send a Lemon Squeezy, I'll parse that out to a integer inside the Lemon Squeezy specific API provider. So I need to go get that value. And I had it somewhere. It's over here. Let's go to store, products. I want to look at this. And I need the variant ID. And we're just going to drop that right there. Save. Groovy. So static catalog provider, M, subscription template, we got it. Cool. Let's go back to GitHub. Well, before we do this in GitHub, adds a vendor item ID property to the subscription template so that we have easy to the subscription template populates it on the paid subscription instance. Easy access to that when creating a new checkout object. Checkout session. Commit. And we'll push those up to the cloud. Boop. Now I'm just pushing them up to the cloud source code, source control repository. So here's that. Done. And I'm going to add a comment to this. Added vendor item ID to the subscription template class to store this value. Added the lemon squeezy variant ID for the DM's familiar monthly subscription to that catalog item, the hard-coded catalog provider library. Comment. Boom. Back to VS Code. Oh, before I go any further, I gotta just touch the file. Save that. Tagging commit with the issue ID hashtag. Where's GitHub? Where are you? Here we are. That is lucky number 13. Commit. Sync. Okay. Now that will get included and linked to that GitHub issue when I do my pull request. All right, back to the backlog. Boop. When lemon squeezy events come through for a customer for the first time, we need to record their customer ID at lemon squeezy in their local account. All right. So there's static catalog provider. We can close this stuff up. We don't need it right now. Excuse me. In the account manager, here we are. Close this down, shrink this for the time being. And this is managed customer subscription async. And the managed subscription request is just a wrapper. It's an operation request around subscription action detail. Go to the definition here. Vendor supplied customer ID. Groovy. Now, is this being accounted for? In these workloads? Try to change detail, blah, 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 blah. Build profile, get user ID for vendor. There's no ID in the identity service. Okay, get catalog item async. Change subscription request. And perform subscription action. Let's go to the definition on this guy. So prepare working variables. We do the things. We get the catalog item. Yeah. Apply the change. We get the strategy. Execute it. If it fails, copy the errors and bounce. If the change completed is false, okay. Change response.payload. Return this response. Okay, so it's altered the subscription, but it hasn't yet saved anything back. So if change subscription has errors or warnings, if the payload's null, customer profile is that. And here's where we update back to the save user account. Now, if the inbound request has a vendor customer ID, we need to ensure that that ID is stored with the customer's local account profile. And customer profile equals update vendor IDs. And we'll just do this privately here. Private. There we go. Vendor ID, vendor customer ID, set vendor ID for vendor. None of these things work. That's just GitHub Copilot imagining what it needs to do. So, string cust ID, yep, at vendor equals action detail dot customer supply or vendor supplied customer ID. String vendor name equals action detail dot vendor name. If profile dot external IDs dot any where external ID EI dot vendor name equals false, and it didn't guess the property name right. It's just vendor. I believe it's just vendor. Let's make sure. Yep, it is. It didn't quite get the property right. Oh, excuse me. If customer ID at vendor is null or white space, we'll just bail on modified. We don't need this else. So if the customer is not already registered, or if the profile already has an association for this person at this vendor, we don't need to do anything here. Okay. Save. And that should cover what we need. Update vendor IDs. Bounce things around. Save the profile back to storage. Reconcile their group memberships in Entra. And yeah. That's that. We're going to have to test all of this stuff. Like, holy smokes. Added code in manage customer subscription. To add vendor specific customer ID if it's missing on the app local customer profile. Adds code 2. Number 14. Commit. And just before I push to live, let's build. Let's at least make sure the solution builds. I don't have any automated CI/CD pipeline for this subsystem yet, so I ain't going to sweat it. Now, non-nullable property local customer ID, inbound LS events. Let's clean up these problems here. Add item. Clean up compiler warnings. And we're going to convert this to an issue on here. Assign myself. Edit the name. Ongoing. Save that. Edit. As work happens, inevitably, some compiler warnings will creep into the code base. Try to repair the causes of those as they come up. If not, keep the code tidy on a periodic basis. Save. All right, we can close that issue. Or not close the issue, but close the UI on the issue. And I'm just going to leave this here. But I wanted something to tag as I fix these. So local customer ID equals string.empty. Email address string.empty. Let's do these ones. Event name. String.empty. Groovy. And event ID. String.empty. Okay. Good. Those classes that had stuff, they'll become much more relevant as I get deeper into the API integration part of this. Here we go. Cleaned up some compiler warnings about non-null properties not being initialized upon instruction. #16. Commit and sync the changes. Okay. And I wonder if it associated anything. It doesn't seem to have. That's okay. Implement manage subscription, updates the contract definitions, feature, replace IFX. What the deuce? Create API project. There we go. And I can just zap that UI again. All right. That one's checked in. Connect API endpoint methods with the backend logic components. You know what? I think we're about ready to do that for one of them. So I'm going to pull this over here. All right. Oh, I need to add another issue over here. Add a button to the DM's familiar for upgrade to paid subscription. Let's pop this open, turn it into an issue on TDMF admin. Excuse me. Assign me. I am the only developer here. Edit. For users in TDMF who do not currently have a paid subscription, you need to add a button to the UI in various places that allows them to click it and start the process of signing up for a paid subscription. That button will call the admin APIs, call an endpoint on the admin API that will create and post a checkout object to the Lemon Squeezy API. The LS API will respond with a link to the checkout page, which will return to the TDMF application, which will load that URL in a new tab, or perhaps a modal dialog if I'm feeling frisky. Probably a new tab. XD. Save. That's going to hang out in the to-dos section for the time being. All right, connect API endpoint methods with the backend logic components. Floop. Let's go here. Excuse me. In order to do this, I need to first close the account manager, come into the store manager, and let's take a look at start checkout request. That takes in checkout data. It needs public string, local user ID. Public string, product SKU, requested SKU, get set, string.empty, save. Let's take a look at the response. That is going to be returning a nullable string. Pardon me. Okay. Yeah. That's plenty. I really don't need more than just the URL that goes back. Let's take another look at that. Okay, I've even labeled it as checkout URL on there. All right, manage subscription request. That's not something we need to do. So new checkout data. We need the local user ID, the requested SKU, and is there anything else I need to provide in the API? Well, it just so happens that down here, in addition to this test JSON drill thing that we played with this morning, we can test the request construction. And all I need to provide is the customer entry ID and the product ID to purchase. Okay. And this is what the API provider's data requirement is. So there's customer account manager. I don't need you open right now. I can close the program. And let's come into the store manager. First thing we got to do, private IEnumerable of service error. Validate start checkout request. Now, in the past, you've seen me do much more generic, repeatable things. Right now, the only thing this manager is responsible for doing is starting a checkout request. And there's not really any need to add all of that extra abstraction around validation and all that other stuff because we're only dealing with a single use case. When I implement other use cases, I will be refactoring this to handle an operation request of some data type that'll validate things out in a more generic manner. But for now, I have exactly one thing that I need to do. And I am going to zap all of that. Goodbye. List of service errors equals new. Boop. Return errors. Save. That's not terribly exciting. And start checkout response. Got to spell it right. Equals new with the request and null for the payload. Var validation result equals that response dot add error validation result, and the errors have what's called a site. So string execution site equals interpolation. And we are going to say request dot, whoops, not yet. I did a really nice pattern for this yesterday up in, I think it was in the API provider. LS API, let's come in here. I kind of want to steal it. Not steal it, but reuse it. That's what I want. Store manager. We're just going to drop this here. And back up to the start of the line. And then what I can do is as I'm copying the errors that come out of validation into the response object, I can mark all of those errors as having occurred within the context of start checkout async. All of these things are set on the operations. Request new checkout session. Cool. And what I'm going to do is say store manager dot request new checkout session. I like that. I like that quite a lot. If response dot should halt process, return response. Now, it doesn't like that because it wants me to return task, but by marking this method as async, and yeah, it's throwing a compiler warning right now because I'm not awaiting anything, but whatever. Excuse me. So we're past the validation. We haven't done much yet. I'm going to come down here and stop that try stuff. Return response. There we go. Now, convert the manager's request data. I can remember the name of that class. It's new checkout data to the DTO expected by the API access component. Invoke the API access component. Handle the results. That's really the whole pattern. Since this is a single method, until I implement other methods, I'm going to do the mapping code between the idiomatic types here. Now, the API requires, or rather the access module, requires something from store access abstractions, and it needs checkout data. API data equals new. Man, it's got no freaking clue what the heck. Copilot is a wonderful, wonderful thing, but sometimes it gets a little bit overeager. Excuse me. Now, the customer enter ID is on the request.payload.checkout.data.local user ID. And if we've gotten to this point, we know that neither the request nor the checkout data are null. So we can use that null forgiving operator. Don't ever use that when you don't absolutely know that by the time you reach that line of code, you've got a null, or you've got a null scenario. Now this product ID to purchase, it's going to be a little different. We're going to need to find that product ID because I believe our new checkout data is bringing in the SKU. So I'm going to say private subscription template get template for SKU. String SKU. And we're just going to do this locally. It doesn't know what a subscription template is because I haven't referenced that guy as a project. No, I have not. So we better bring those in. Add project reference. And I need catalog abstractions. And I'm going to need the hard-coded catalog. Cool. Private, read-only, my catalog access, catalog access. New, what's it called? Static catalog provider. There. We're not going to inject that because there's no variance of it. It's literally like a static hard-coded class with all the hard-coded stuff in it. Like, I really don't care about dependency injection for that component. When I need to, I'll rework it. But I don't see a need to do that anytime in the near future. And near future, I mean year. Because I don't expect that to experience much change at all. So let's fill this in. Okay. Did I spell it wrong? Subscription template resource. Subscription template resource template equals null. Return template. -1, just to shut that up for now. And catalog access dot get catalog item async SKU. Async task. And I don't know why I made this async, because it's literally just referencing a memory item. But what the heck? Save. And that will return either the requested subscription template resource or null. Let's go to the implementation on this guy. Yep, that's all it does. Super simple. All right. Now, we need var subdata equals, stop that, get template for SKU, requested SKU. ls requires the product ID as a, oh, that's a hole in my contract. Let's go to the definition on this guy. Checkout data. Let's make this a string. Save. equals subdata dot vendor item ID. If subdata is null, if subdata dot vendor item ID string dot is null or white space. Excuse me. That doesn't get a semicolon. Service error equals new response.add error site is execution site. Requested SKU is not found on the catalog. Error kind equals service error kind dot request payload validation and severity service error severity dot error. Cool. Vendor item ID is not administered through our merchant service. Good enough. If response.should halt process, return response. Save. And there we go. Now, checkout data. This is going to cause problems up in the API provider because the API provider is currently coded to see product ID to purchase as an integer because Lemon Squeezy expects an integer. But, like I said a few minutes ago, we may not always use them. And other e-com providers might do their IDs as GUIDs or strings or whatever. So what we have to do, and this is the advantage to having this separate internal component that handles all of the Lemon Squeezy specific stuff. So we're not dealing with the abstraction. We are dealing with the actual implementation. So come into the API provider, and we've got some validate request stuff. So go to the definition. Payload's missing. Validate request data. come down here, validate checkout data. Let's go in here. Now the checkout data is missing. Customer entry ID is required. If string dot is null or white space, product ID to purchase is required. We can add another rule if int dot try parse is false. Lemon squeezy requires an integer value for product ID. Save. Now we've got a compiler error up here. Let's take a look. And sure enough, excuse me, it's complaining about the string being an int. That's fine. Int dot try parse out int variant ID. There we go. And we already know that we can parse that value out to an int, because if not, we would have caught it in our validation and bailed out. So I don't feel bad checking the return on the returned Boolean on try parse. We can just go ahead and use our variant ID here. I'm going to add a note. We know that this will evaluate to true because we've already validated that expectation. If we hadn't checked for this specifically, we'd want to put this in a conditional and possibly bail out operation. I'm just leaving that for myself, for future me, because when I come back to this in 6 months or a year from now and I see this, I'm going to say, what the hell was I thinking? I should be checking the result of that. But with this comment, I know that we're already checking it, and I don't have to go digging through the code to make sure that that's the case. And you know what? These things should really so we got phase 1 validation. I don't want to run this twice. This is phase 2 validation. You know what? It's fine. I can clean this up later. var API access response equals, oh, that's right. It is looking for a checkout request. I'm going to call that API request. And we have to pass request and API data. That's right. Do this. Public CTOR. Operation request, request, base, request. There we go. Save that. Come in here. Stop it. Checkout data is API data. We don't pass the API data, we pass the API request. If API access response dot successful, and also the payload is not null, we're setting the execution site in there. API access response. I believe I've got I know I have a method that makes this. Okay, op response donor. Cool. Yeah. From API access response. There we go. And we've handled the results. We don't really need these comments. All right. Make the call. And yeah, I could collapse all of this nonsense into a single constructor invocation and nest the constructor for the API data. But that honestly, it looks ugly to me when I see it, so I usually only do that when I'm trying to do something quick and dirty. So if it's successful and the payload is not null, we do that. Errors, return the response. Cool. And that is where I am going to call it a day. So just before I do that, let's do my GitHub ritual, or what I need my GitHub ritual to become. And edit. This will be a multi-commit issue. Yeah, not ideal. But whatever. Save. Just wanted to save that comment. And adds the code to the store manager class to convert an inbound start checkout operation to the necessary resource models and invoke the resource access components. Hashtag 10. Commit, push, and we have ourselves a pretty productive session. I'm going to keep working through this stuff just because I want to get it done. I will, of course, if I see or do something particularly interesting, I'll make a note to myself to review it in detail tomorrow or in the next session. But I really do want to get this back-end administrative code finished and integrated and callable from outside, because I'm getting very, 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 very close to being able to run my soft launch of the actual product. I could technically do it without all of this administrative back-end stuff, but if I can do it with these automations in place, that'll make me much, much, much happier. So until tomorrow, take care of yourselves. If you are in a place that's experiencing this winter weather that's coming our way, be careful, stay warm, stay home if you can. I grew up in Canada, and when winter decided to winter, we just stayed home. We didn't go out and do stuff. We just stay home. And like, winter is one of Canada's national sports. So, you know, I'm kind of an expert at dealing with winter. Stay inside unless you have to, or unless you can't. But yeah, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, give yourself some grace when you make mistakes. Until next time, happy coding.